This is part 2 of the Phase School of Architecture and Design Cuboid. I wanted to show you guys this. I've done numerous, and I do mean numerous, layers of rubber, coating this mold all up. But what I wanted to show you was using polyethylene mini fibers. So let's add some mini fibers to the cup. Not a huge amount, it's not like that. I'm just eyeballing the amount. Sort of done a lot of batches, so I have gotten a feel for what works. There's one drop of this rapid set. This is a 20-gram batch of rubber. One drop of rapid set turns this into from several hours cure to like an hour cure. It's pretty darn fabulous. It's worked out really well because I have put a lot of layers of rubber onto this mold, and let's put another layer on. So I just slam it on there. But I have found that the easiest way to smooth this out is just to run it on there with my fingers. Just spatula it on there, smoothing it on there. No idea if this stuff's good for your fingers. Probably isn't, this rubber. Probably gonna get some horrible silicosis or something from the silicone rubber. If I do, it hasn't caught up with me yet because I've been doing this for years, using my fingertips as spatulas to smooth out the rubber. So I'm just laying it on, building it up, little at a time. You don't have to achieve perfect smoothness. It doesn't hurt it if there's, some surface irregularity in the mold. So don't worry about it if your mold isn't flawlessly smooth. It doesn't have to be. All right, that looks pretty good. Not bad. But you get the idea. This mold has just been built up in layer after layer after layer of rubber. You don't have to pour this rubber in one coat. You can build it up in successive coats, and it works just fine. This is where we left off. And I think that I've got enough coats of rubber on now to make a good blanket. One of the ways that you can test that, by the way, what I'm about to show you does not work if your model is clay or something soft, obviously, but it works great if you have a rock hard model. There are parts of this mold that I know are more than thick enough, like where I built up these seams to make the cut edges all along here. I don't need to test those. I know those are really thick. Likewise, down in the wells between the flutes of the cube, that rubber is quite thick. It's probably more than a half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick. So the parts that worry me are the parts that kind of stick out, and I'm going, well, is that thick enough? So one way to do it is to take a pin, just a straight pin, I don't even know if you can see it, and just jam it in there until it stops, and you can feel it hit the plastic. This is a hard plastic model. And just mark it with your fingernail, and I know that I have got, I don't know if you can see that, but I have got not a half an inch, but a good 3/8 of an inch right there. That's plenty thick. That's almost too thick, but let's test some other areas. Here's another area. By the way, you can stick all the pinholes you want into the rubber. The rubber just seals them right up. If you cast rubber around a pin, you will make a hole in the rubber. If you're sticking a pin into rubber and you pull the pin out, it just seals right back up. Can't tell at all. Doesn't hurt it at all. So here's another. That felt really deep too. Yeah, that was another 3/8 of an inch. So I'm feeling, generally speaking, like I've got enough rubber going on here. And I think it's ready to go, and we are ready to make the shell. Oh my God, I have to clean off the table now. This is gonna be horrendous. Hate cleaning up, it's terrible. It's awful, it's horrible. That was hideous. I hope I never have to do that again. The rubber blanket is ready to go, and we're going to slap some fiberglass on it. I saved you the pain and suffering of watching me arrange my table. But what I have is a bunch of little fragments of fiberglass. I have pre-sprayed the first half of this mold, this top half of this mold, with a release agent, MR15, just a parting agent. I'm pretty sure that parting agent isn't necessary and that I can release the epoxy from this rubber but a little parting agent never hurt anything. Let's measure out some res, shall we? This is tricky. Love this stuff. The ratio of this stuff is 29 parts of this to 100 parts of that. Anytime I hear a ratio like 29 to 100, I've got to figure they're not kidding. They want that to be accurately measured. So we're going to work hard to do that. This is going to make a white mold, and we are just going to lay down the material here like crazy people and have some fun. Let's lay this down and have some fun. Is this going to make a giant mess all over everything? Possibly. One never knows. Okay, that's pretty well mixed. Let's lay it down. Let's brush it out. Let's just brush it on out. This is my little experiment in doing this way. Let's see what happens when we start to lay these pieces down. No idea how this is going to go. It seems to be laying on there just fine. Laying on there good. I'm going to drip like mad, I can tell that already. I'm also going to have to kind of keep track myself of where I've been and how many layers I got going on. But this isn't science. This isn't making Ferrari parts here. This is simpler than that. It's easier. It's not quite that difficult. The question is going to be will we get this fiberglass to lay on there smoothly enough for me to be happy? You can tell when I'm just screwing around and experimenting. Ooh, 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 what do we got going there? Those are threads, okay. Just keep working it. Just keep working it. This is not, automotive parts. This is not car parts. This doesn't require that level of workmanship on this. If you're a fiberglass guy, you're probably laughing at me along about now. All I want to do is support that rubber blanket. That's my only goal here. And that we will definitely accomplish. No doubt about it. I could have cut these into way smaller pieces. That I now know for sure. I'm working fast because it's warm in this room. I don't know how much open time I'm going to get on this epoxy. I'm going really willy-nilly here. I'm not being very scientific about how many layers I'd put where. I just don't feel like I have the time to be scientific. I think I just need to lay the material on there as quick as I can and worry about it later. But I think it's going to make a heavier shell, so that's fine too. This will not be a weak shell by the time we get it goobered up, I guarantee. Okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep jamming here. This thing's long enough. I'm going to jam, keep going, and come back to you in a bit. All right, here is the results of the first layer. Pretty sure I can't put it in my portfolio to get a job making Corvette bodies, but at least I know it's going to work. It's pretty rigid. I put a lot of layers of fiberglass on there. It's not pretty, but it will work. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do next to make it a little bit less hideous looking. And we'll finish this one up and get on to the other side. The next step on this mold case is going to be kind of smoothing this thing out. And let's try something here. Mix up a batch. I've got 2.9 grams of hardener and 10 grams of resin in this little cup. Always mix the two components, the resin and the hardener, together before you add any powders or anything like that. That way you know that the epoxy is well mixed. I'm not going to need a lot of this stuff, so let's not go crazy and mix up too thick a paste here. So I'm just adding polyethylene mini fibers. It's an all-purpose thickener for resins. And what that's going to do for me is to make more of a putty, more of a paste than a brushable resin. How's that looking? Is that what we want? Does that stay put? Yeah, more or less stays put. Okay, could even be a tiny, tiny bit more. We'll call that done. Let's brush this on, see what happens. Now what I want to do is I just want to fill in, smooth out, brush on any places where there's gaps, or there's kind of fibers sticking out, anything like that. Just kind of using this material to smooth out the surface. Make it a little bit touchier, nicer surface than it has right now. And that should work out okay. So this is just the epoxy mix with mini fibers. As you can see, it's just filling out any little gaps, any little areas where there might be some thin spots or some gaps where the fiberglass lifted off. Any weird thing that happened gets kind of filled in and touched over. Not going to need a ton of this, just a light coat. That should do it. Let me make sure I used up all my resin here so I don't waste any. If I got it mixed, might as well use it. Okay. All right, that looks good. This shell is looking good. It feels a lot better. You would not want to be rubbing your hand all over it because there are still little fiberglass spikes. I have not taken some 80 grit sandpaper and gone over it, which I will do. The other thing you can see that I did was I marked out the edge of the rubber seam with a marker, and I'm going to trim and sand this edge to that seam. But time now to put the other side on, and in order to do that, we've got to take this shell off. Now, taking a mother shell off of a blanket mold can really be a real strain. It can really be hard, and a lot of times you have to use wedges and stuff. This should pop right off. Yeah, it's going to pop off. I can tell just it's already, I already know it's going to pop off. It's coming off. But I don't want to break it. I don't want to break it. Oh yeah, it really grips on there, boy. Yeah, it's only wanting to come off from one side. Now that, I looked at this issue to make sure that there would be a side that you could release it from. And I think it will release mostly from this side. But I tell you what, you don't want to break it. And so this is a really irregularly shaped thing. If I had put enough rubber on here to make a basketball out of this, it would have popped right off. But there's enough landscape to kind of lock the shell to the mold. Nonetheless, it is coming. It is coming. Come on, guy. Come on, baby. Don't want to break it. There we go. There we go. I felt you move. I felt the earth move. There it goes. Yeah, it's these points that are causing it to hold on here. All right. Nice. Little clamshell. It's really thin, but it's really rigid, just as predicted. That's exactly what we were looking for. Super lightweight, not very thin. Interestingly, there's stickery little bits of fiberglass on the inside too. So I'm gonna go over the inside and the outside. As I said, trim the edge, make it nice and clean. Good, very pleased with this. This worked out well. Now some other tricks that you can do is if you're having trouble getting the mold back into the shell, one thing that you can do is you can drill some holes in strategic places in the shell. It doesn't hurt the support of the mold rubber at all. But if you drill some holes, you can push it in and it just vents the air out in case you're actually trapping air between the rubber and the shell itself. Okay, good. Let's put the other side on this mold. And I'm going to go ahead and do that because it's exactly like I did this. The only difference is what I have done for this second side is I've cut the pieces smaller. As you can see, I think maybe that will make it easier to apply the fiberglass because the big pieces won't have to bend around so much. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll come back to you when we have both sides of the shell ready to go. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to hold this whole thing together. The shell is good and hard. Nice and solid. It's all raggedy still, haven't trimmed it. So I'm just going to come along here and do a little trimmage. At least I'm going to trim off the fabric parts. The scissors are really not adequate for cutting the resin. This epoxy resin is unbelievably tough. So we'll just trim a little bit here. It's still got all kinds of little deadly needles of fiberglass sticking up. And by the way, when they get stuck in your fingers, they get into your skins, these like little microscopic needles of fiberglass. Oh, what a pain, because you can't even see them, but they remind you that they're there every 2 seconds. Yes, the hazards of being a surfboard maker. That's why I never made surfboards. That and the fact that I don't surf. I don't want the sharp edge of fiberglass hanging over the rubber mold because if it does, it'll just cut the rubber bands. So we're going to treat this edge nicely. Get rid of it. Just marker it, very rough. The question is, how are we going to hold the mold together? And of course, it's going to be rubber bands. You know me, I'm the king of rubber bands. So what we're going to need to do is make cleats. If you'll remember on the Pug Mug project, I cast the cleats in resin and then glued them on. But in this project, we're going to use a whole different technique just because it's fun to show you guys some different ways to approach these problems. It can really be hard to get the shell off a blanket mold. And so that is proving to be the case with this one. I started to pull this off, and I said, ooh, this one's really being a mother father. It's really being a bear, so it's hard to pull it off. I had planned to pull it off from this direction here, thinking it would come off most easily. And I think that's going to be the case, but boy, oh boy, oh boy. This thing is on there, man. So the question is, what do you do when they're really stuck on there? You depend a little bit on the flexibility of the shell, but sometimes you can build these shells that have zero flexibility or darn near zero flexibility. You don't want to cut your hands on the sharp edges of this fiberglass, that's for sure. You just want to keep working it. Now, on big molds, and even this mold, wedges are often the way to go. They actually sell plastic wedges that you can stick in. You want to be careful when you drive a wedge in that you don't cut the rubber. This thing is coming. Looks like it's going to come off now. I don't want to break it. That's the thing. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, has this one been a struggle to pop. This was not wanted to go. If this happens to you, don't panic, don't get crazy. The last thing you want to do is to have to cut the mold off or to really damage the shell, because you'll never really get it back. So you kind of, this is one of those times when you just kind of want to work it. Okay. I think it's coming. All right. Whew. Well, we got them off. So let's go off and finish these edges nice and neat, and then we'll put on the cleats because we're going to use rubber bands, and rubber bands are going to need cleats. I got this boy all trimmed. I just went through with the belt sander, cleaned the edges off, went over the whole thing with 80 grit inside and out, and now this shell is much more friendly to the fingers. There's still a few little sharp spots, but overall it's safe to handle. No more fibers sticking out to kill you. So that's a beautiful thing. So now the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need cleats to hold the rubber bands on when this thing all gets assembled and ready to mold. Back in my home shop, you know, I'm a Magic Sculpt fan, but I didn't bring it with me. So I went to buy some more. And instead, I found Apoxie Sculpt. Ta-da! Not a sponsor. They're not paying me to use this stuff. This will be fun because I've never used it. I think that it's going to be remarkably similar to Magic Sculpt. Let's open it up, see what we got. That looks exactly like the A side of Magic Sculpt. Identical. Okay, the B side's a little darker. Not much, but it's a little bit darker. Oh yeah, Magic Sculpt, Apoxie Sculpt, I will bet are very similar. They look the same. The B side is definitely more resinous and stiffer than the A side. So let's volume out 2 equal amounts. Close enough. Close enough. All right. Let's knead this stuff up. Here we go. I always like to mix this stuff by making it into potato chips. Stacking it. Just stack it, mix it, knead it. We'll get it mixed up here and we'll cut to the fun. See how this stuff mixes. I just fold it, rub it, fold it, roll it, fold it, roll it, and it mixes really fast. Okay, that is plenty well mixed. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna figure out where we wanna put in cleats. And so I know that I'm going to put a cleat over in here. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that the Apoxie Sculpt is really going to stick to this surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to really rub on a base so that it has a chance to really adhere. Because that way I know that it's going to bond to this surface. Worst case scenario is if these cleats don't stick as well as I'm expecting them to stick, If they pop off, in other words, I'll just take 5-minute epoxy and glue them back on. I don't know if you guys have noticed over the course of these videos, there is sort of an underlying guiding principle involved in a lot of the stuff that I do that basically says, put the craftsmanship where it shows. In other words, don't waste your time crafting the hell out of something that doesn't matter. And that for a very good reason. I got better things to do than sculpt something that no one's ever gonna see except the 8 million people that watch this video. However, all of my efforts, all of my labors, all of everything is directed at the finished product because I want what I do to show, and that's important. So that looks like a cleat to me. You don't need fancy tools. I'm using a coffee stirrer to sculpt these up. And you know what? You could buy these really expensive Tuscan, Italian, fine, beautiful sculpting tools with walnut handles and oh, so lovely, so pleasurable to work with, so nice. Or you could use a popsicle stick and it works just as well. Anybody got any questions? I don't think so. It's pretty obvious what I'm doing. Cleats. Rubber band cleats. All you need. It's going to work like a champ. It's going to be perfect. I'm going to do that all around in strategic spots. Just putty this thing up. And when I get that all done, then we're going to be ready for the drama and all of this and the horror and all that. And then as we're going to cut the mold open. And that'll be a whole nother thing. Okay, cool. Got my cleats put on. I'm gonna tell you, I never made anything that looked remotely like this before, but I think they're gonna work like a champ. Remembering that the idea is always to close a mold with even gentle pressure. And I think my cleats will do it. Not only that, I think it's a rather magnificent alien looking fine piece of sculpture. Belongs in the Museum of Modern Art. I have to tell you, this channel is fun for me because I do these projects. I've never made a mold that looks like this before, purely an experiment, but it feels pretty good. And if we can cut it right, I think it's going to be magnificent. So let's pop these mold halves apart. There you go. There you go. Come on out of there. There we go. See, these molds, this sticks in there pretty good. Man, oh man, this is not easy to remove. I may have to work on this a little more to make this easier. Who knows? All right, this is it, kids. Time to cut the mold. The whole success of this project largely depends on cutting this mold properly. I need to cut down this edge, and this is not so critical, and down this edge. And I have to cut exactly on the corner. If it was just a willy-nilly cut, no biggie, but it's not a willy-nilly cut. I need to be right on the corner, so that's what we're gonna do. So let's start with a brand spanking new X-Acto blade. So I know it's razor sharp. Get it snugged up tight, and away we go. First thing to do, just wanna pop this plug out. And that was easy enough. All right, got the plug popped out. That helps me a lot. I'll need this plug, by the way. We'll clean it up, and this is going to be our little bottle stopper when we make the castings. So let's put that in there so we don't lose it. Start by cutting down the line. I'm just going to go slow. I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to cut down. And I hope that I'm going to be able to hit the corner comfortably. This is long about the time you feel like you wish you had 12 hands to do this job. Yeah, this is why, by the way, this is exactly why people are afraid to cut molds, because it's tricky. I want to see where I'm aiming to here. I'm going to need to change my lighting, I think, a little bit here. Help guide me to that corner. I want to find that corner perfectly. It's right there. Okay, I'm going to change my lighting because I can't see what I'm doing down in here. And let me get back to you. Hang on a second. Okay, the light's really in my face, but it's going to be handy for me because I need to find that corner. I see it. I see right where I'm going to. Okay, I'm right on the corner there. Good. Let's see if I can. What's better here? Okay. Oh, it's hard to get down in there. Wow, okay. I knew that the hardest thing about this entire project was going to be cutting this mold. Especially by myself. This is where an assistant would come in handy, along about now. But I don't have one. The thing is that when I pull it like that, it's hard to see the corner when I pull it. It's hard to see where I'm going. I'm cutting it right down. I know you guys are not going to be able to see this. Right down that edge. Whoo, man, there's not a lot of support on that, is there? I see why, too, because I'm screwing it up. I've already screwed it up. I went the easy route. Okay, I gotta stop and see how I'm gonna reevaluate this. I can tell you right now, I'm not thrilled about the cut. First saw this project, the thing that scared me more than anything else were the sharp edges. When I see a bunch of sharp edges sticking out in every direction in what is supposed to be a resin casting project, I know we're in trouble. You just are. And so it proved in this case that the whole crux of the problem of making an absolutely perfect casting, the whole problem was going to be coming down these cut edges absolutely perfectly. And what happened was, it turned out to be basically impossible to come down the edge perfectly. I came down the edge really close, and for the simple reason I could never see it. As I cut down through it, even looking sideways at it, I could never see it. As a result, every one of these castings is going to have a very slight parting line showing on this edge. And that means that in order to clean that parting line, I'm going to have to obscure some of this surface detail right at the parting line. Now I'm, being hypersensitive, because if you look, the model is full of flaws. And my flaws aren't going to add too many horribleness to the flaws. But you know what I like? I like perfection. I never get it, but I always go for it. And we're not going to get it here either. We're going to capture all the imperfections in this top surface, imperfections in the bottom surface, and now I was hoping that I could cut just perfectly on that line. And I couldn't. Now you would say, well, I told you so, you should have used a clay up mold. But if I had used, I could have, and if I had used a clay up mold, then I would have had two problems. One is I still would have a parting line on that surface, and it would still be a big gorky clay parting line. I'm sorry, but you see a clay parting line clearly every time. Whereas cut molds, you can make the parting lines completely disappear. And also because of the surface, as I said earlier in this video, because of the surface, I was afraid that if I jammed clay on against the surface, it was going to get in there. And then when I took the clay out to pour the other side, I would have to somehow clean up. No matter what, I was going to introduce flaws into this casting. I looked at this when it first came, this gorgeous object, and I said, I am fudge caked. I am fire trucked, because it's just got razor sharp everything. This goes back to my theme, and the theme of this channel is, do you want to make good resin castings? Do you want to make really clean, perfect castings of your sculptures or objects? Then you better understand resin casting, and you better design the object for the process of resin casting. If you don't, your resin casts are going to be flawed. They're going to have flaws. There's no way around it. There's no way to defeat the process of resin casting. It is what it is. So this mold is not perfectly cut. I think it's going to yield up decent castings. But the thing I feared the most about this project were these sharp edges and getting clean edges on two of them. The other edges are going to be perfect, but two of these edges are going to have slight flaws coming down the edges. We'll just chalk them up to what we kind of expected would happen, hoped wouldn't. But hey, let's make the cast and see what happens. You know what? I view it as a learning opportunity for me and for you guys. I still think it's a great object. I'm looking forward to seeing the castings, and we're going to do that next week. Hey, if you like this video, watch this video next. Keep your projects coming, keep your questions coming, keep your comments coming. I love hearing from all of you guys, and I will see you next week. And maybe we'll be crying. Maybe we'll be going, hey, it's okay.